All right, so these are a lot of my punches, chisels, forming tools that I've made in the last few years. Uh, Most of them have specific uh, design, but can be used for multiple other things. A lot of them I rework as I go along and work with them, and I go, well, I should do something a little bit different because this isn't working out for me. All right, so I broke them down into specific, uh, not necessarily groups for what they're designed for, but the steels for specific reasons. So the first two here are drift punches that I formed out of 1018, mild steel, obviously. I had a fellow Rockason that wanted a Tory made, and I used these to form the square holes in which I inserted the bottom support pieces. Now the rest of these ones up here are all 01 tool steel, and this big one right here. These are all my drift punches for axes, sledgehammers, hammers, whatever gets a hole in it. That's what these are for, and they're 01, so they're pretty tough. There is a big difference between using 01 and say like H13 and S7. This one here is 4140, which works okay for light cool steel, but not so well for hot stuff, as it deforms the. Let's see if we get that. It will deform the tip a little bit, punching into hot steel. So I stopped using it for that. Probably reforge that into something else. So I'll come back over here. So these are my H13s, which is for hot work. Anything above 1300 degrees, that's what I use these for. I have a slit and chisel. This is a hot drift punch for tomahawk heads. This one here is my veining tool that I use for making leaves, but you can also use it as a hand fullering tool. This is another hand fullering tool, just a little more aggressive, wider. This one here is for punching different diameter holes up to, if I remember right, it was 3/8. This one here is a fine line hot chisel for doing like animal heads and things like that. This is my 4-punch for making horseshoes. This is set up for a European style head nail. As you can see, I kind of got a little sloppy last time I was making some horseshoes, and I let this get a little bit too hot and it mushroomed on me. I need to be more cognizant of what's going on when I'm doing that. Somebody was out trying to talk to me when I was doing it, that's why. This was my original 4-punch that I made when I got back out of the Army. It's okay for like doing smaller nail heads, but for like some of the bigger horseshoes, I've had people want me to make them a pair or a set of larger horseshoes, so they'd be like around a number 2 or number 3 for, their horseshoe pits, and I'm okay with that. This here is a bob punch, and this thing I've had for eons. Now this is also H13. I made this in '94, if I remember correctly. This is for pulling clips on horseshoes, but you can use it for just about anything, even doing up maybe a set of eyes for an animal head, or punching shallow rivets, or not rivets, indentations in steel, maybe even a hole. This here is my eye punch for giving animal heads eyes. Also, it'll work as a hole punch too. Here's another fine hot chisel. What I found out with this is that I initially when I made this, I was making it for a slitting punch. However, drifting a piece of steel that's 1.5 to 2 inches thick by 1.5 to 2 inches wide, this being so thin, the heat alone ate the steel back about 1/4 inch, so I had to redo that one also. Now this little guy right here, this little guy my granddad made, it's called an anvil devil. This is made out of a piece of railroad car spring, and it's for marking steel. You just lay it on top of the anvil, lay your steel across there, and hit it. I like using this when I'm marking round stock, because I can beat the living crap out of this and almost cut the round stock in half or where I want it, and it doesn't deform the... I've never sharpened this, let me put it that way. The only thing I've done to this is clean the rust off with some emery cloth, and that's it. But yeah, this is one tough little guy. Alright, so these are my cold punches and chisels and gouges. So this is obviously my center punch. And this is made out of S7. As a matter of fact, all these are made out of S7. This is my cold punch, or correction, my cold chisel. And I made this, 3 years ago. This here is my 4-punch, or my Pritchel. It goes along with my 4-punch. This is my nail hole finisher Pritchel for making horseshoes. On one side it's angled a little different than on the other. So one way is to help set the shank of the nail into the hole, and on the back side you rotate it the other side, and it'll make the horseshoe nail will be forced to the outer portion of the hoof wall. All right. This here is a grooving gouge that I use in mild steel for creating channels and the like of that. And this one I made for helping me define eyes a little bit better than with my eye punch. This allows me to clean up those marks and kind of define them a little bit better. Alright, so this here is my blacksmith's helper. What it does is it sits in the Pritchel hole of my anvil. When I got a piece of hot work that, whether it's round or flat, and I lay it on there and it's a little bit longer than the anvil or something like that, this helps hold that down. This has been quenched, so it has a little, it's 1018, but it has a little bit spring to it, so I can really lock the work down. This guy, I made this out of a Ford U-bolt shackle, excuse me, a U-bolt for rear leaf springs off of a F350. And so this is spring material. This allows me to take and isolate pieces of metal for like making, reducing the thickness of a piece of square or a piece of round. And then this guy is my hot cutoff, or a hardy tool. It sits in the square hole on my anvil, but it's strictly for cutting hot steel. Now with this, a lot of people will cut the steel, but it'll have like an angled section on it. So what I'll do is I'll whack it on one side and rotate it, and I'll rotate it all the way around, so that the piece that gets cut is really thin in the center, and then that allows me to not have a whole lot of cleanup work to do. Now these dudes, these are leaf forms, and these two guys are for making small hooks. This allows me to lock up one end in, make bends in it so that it can be like S hooks, or even if I have like a decorative leaf on one end and I want to make a hook on the other, I can line them up a little bit and use these not just to make a scroll, but also I can make sure that they're straight so they come out. I'm not sitting there pounding on them longer trying to clean them up. All of these tools have multiple uses. All of these chisels, my punches, my drift punches, they all have multiple uses. I don't like making things just for one use. I want something that's got multiple uses. Now this here is a piece of 4140 that I just heated up. I annealed it. I then quenched it in oil. I retempered it a little bit. The thing is it's so thick, and I'll work on it so much it'll get warm, but it won't get so hot that it loses its temper. But it's a softer temper. I draw temper things like all of my punches. All of the striking ends are softer than the working ends. All right, especially with these colder pieces. The hot chisels not so much, because they're going to get hot anyways. But the striking ends are softer than the working ends. With the hot pieces, I have a tendency to try and keep them so that they don't turn blue. They'll get like this color, and that's probably still a little bit too dark, so I need to work on keeping them a lot cooler. I use beeswax to lubricate them, but I also quench them in water. Oh, and these two guys over here, these are forms. Right now I use them for mostly weights, but eventually I'm going to turn these into forms also. These are two pieces of 4140 also. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and share. And I'll talk to you the next time. Till we form again, and I'll see you on the high ground.